The marble lobby gleamed as if waiting for important footsteps. And then she walked in. Firm heels. A navy blue tailored suit. Absolute silence. Just the elegant echo of a presence that didn't ask for permission. There was no scandal or flair, but murmurs died down, and heads turned, not for fame, not for skin, not for extravagance. They turned because they weren't used to seeing power in black skin. Daniel Weaker, CEO of Dominion Equity Partners, one of the most influential women in global finance. But no one in that lobby seemed to know it. Or worse, they didn't care. When she reached the front desk, Daniel handed over her Centurion black card. A card that cannot be requested, only granted, the ultimate symbol of financial power. But instead of respect, she was met with a smirk, probably maxed out, murmured Ethan, the receptionist, without checking, without asking, just by looking at the color of her skin. What Ethan didn't know was that this woman didn't just carry a card. She carried truth, and the price of his smirk would be the collapse of an empire. This story isn't just about a public insult. It's about how a black woman, without raising her voice, dismantled $2.8 billion worth of arrogance, dressed as luxury, and she did it with lethal elegance. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't loud. It's signed with a pen. Subscribe now, if you want to see how one silent decision shook an entire industry. What comes next will leave you speechless. The Centurion black card landed on the counter with a solid metallic thud. There was no need for Daniel to say another word. Her card spoke for her, solid titanium. No visible text, just a silver edge, a symbol reserved not for the rich, but for the powerful. But Ethan didn't look at it with respect. He looked at it with doubt, and then with condescension. "Oh, a black card," he said, feigning politeness. "Those usually expire quickly." The comment floated in the air like a dagger disguised as a smile, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. A couple looked over. A man in the lounge furrowed his brow. No one laughed, because racism doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers behind courtesy. Daniel didn't respond. She didn't frown. She didn't ask to speak to a manager. She just looked at him. Her eyes were like a frozen surface of a lake, calm, clear, impenetrable. And in that moment, Ethan should have realized he had crossed a line. But he did. "I'll see if we have a room for you," he said, emphasizing "you" like a private joke. He typed rapidly, as if doing a favor for someone out of place. Minutes later, he looked up with a forced, satisfied smile. "There's a luxury room available on the 9th floor, but not the presidential suite you mentioned. Seems the upgrade wasn't confirmed. Maybe a problem with your card." Daniel calmly placed the Centurion back in her bag. No protest, just a nod. But within her everything was already sealed. The report was being written in silence, and what the hotel believed to be a simple downgrade was the start of their downfall. The elevator doors closed slowly behind her, like a curtain falling on the first scene of a silent tragedy. Daniel didn't clench her jaw. She didn't check her phone. She simply closed her eyes for a moment. And when she opened them, her mind was already working like a precision machine. Every word, every look, every detail had been recorded in her memory. This wasn't just an uncomfortable interaction. It was a systemic failure. And she, more than a guest, was there as an evaluator. The real purpose of her visit to the Lancaster Grand wasn't to rest. It was to decide whether this chain deserved a $2.8 billion investment from Dominion Equity Partners. When she entered the room assigned to her, a luxury suite, but not the presidential suite she had booked, she noticed everything: the impersonal decor, no panoramic views, no Breville coffee machine, and above all, no respect. It wasn't a technical mistake. It was a message, one she had seen before in London, Munich, Jakarta. She opened her laptop. On the Excel sheet already prepared, she wrote with surgical precision: Lancaster Grand VIP protocol failed, racial profiling observed, condescending attitude, high-risk signal. She wasn't angry. She was resolute. Because the most harmful racism doesn't scream or insult. It whispers, denies, ignores. It hides behind systems, fake smiles and software errors. But Daniel knew how to read invisible codes. And while the world slept, she was already writing the first lines of an empire's downfall. If this story is already moving something inside you, like and comment, silent justice to show we're not alone. What Daniel is about to do is simply epic. The next morning, as golden sunlight filtered through the curtains of the downgraded room, Daniel was already awake, not from insomnia, but by design. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day she would evaluate every corner of the hotel like a system surgeon. She no longer wore the flawless suit. Instead, she dressed in calculated simplicity, a mid-length gray dress, flat shoes, a thin cardigan. She passed as just another executive. No one could guess that beneath that understated appearance was a mind managing billions. She went down for breakfast. Upon arriving at the exclusive lounge, an employee blocked her path with poisoned politeness. "Sorry, only guests with premium access may enter." Daniel showed her key card. "I'm in room 96. I booked the executive package." The employee looked her up and down. "He didn't even check the system. Our records show you're not authorized." He said it with the confidence of someone who thinks denying is harmless. But Daniel already knew. Racism rarely comes alone. It's always paired with selective bureaucracy and systems that just happen to fail. She took out her phone, snapped a picture of the entrance, jotted a note. "Lounge access denied. Executive package confirmed. Pattern of exclusion. Second evidence." She returned to the main lobby. Two employees were chatting quietly. As she passed, one muttered, "Another PR stunt. I don't know why they keep bringing people like that here." He didn't say black. He didn't say minority. But he didn't need to. The venom was already in the air. Daniel didn't react. She didn't turn her head. She simply added another line to her mental archive. Because when racism is systemic, it isn't fought with yelling. It's dismantled with proof. Her room became her operations center. She didn't need hidden cameras or secret microphones. Her memory, her phone, and unshakable determination were enough. What many would dismiss as minor inconveniences, Daniel recorded as pieces of a structure that needed dismantling. She opened her evaluation sheet and marked in red, "Denied services despite executive contract." Passive-aggressive attitude, exclusionary language. She leaned back for a moment, staring at the New York skyline through the window. Outside, the world pulsed with normalcy. Inside, Daniel was weaving a report that could shift the future of an international company. That night, she decided to test every service. She called room service. They spoke quickly, impatiently, as if she were bothering them. She requested early gym access, denied without checking availability. Asked about the spa, no answer. Each rejection was logged, time-stamped and saved. This wasn't a bad day at the hotel. It was a normal routine, for guests who didn't match their idea of the ideal client. But no one knew that the quiet, solitary woman had the power to trigger an ethical alarm that could destroy the reputation of an entire industry. "Racism doesn't always wear, sometimes it wears a uniform," says ma'am politely, and smiles while denying basic rights. Daniel knew it, and that's why she didn't need to raise her voice. It was enough to observe, because in silence, the collapse had already begun. At exactly 6:50, Daniel descended to the hotel's restaurant. She wore an elegant black cocktail dress, discreet yet commanding, hair tied back with precision, subtle makeup, a small clutch in hand. No assistants, no security detail, no visible signs of authority, just her presence. The restaurant lobby was calm, warm lighting, polite murmurs, tables near the windows, vacant like thrones awaiting approval. She approached with a serene smile. "Weaker, I have a reservation for one," she said. The hostess, Megan, looked up and hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. Too brief to register for anyone, except for someone like Daniel, trained to read micro-expressions. "Yes, Ms. Weaker, we have your table, however the window seats are already taken," Megan said. Daniel glanced over. 3 tables by the windows sat completely empty. No reserved signs, no glasses, no guests. She didn't argue, just nodded. Inside is fine. They led her to a table near a frosted glass wall, 2 rows back from the views. She sat, removed her coat, pulled out her phone, and discreetly pressed the recording button hidden in her lapel. A standard tool for senior field auditors. 5 minutes later, Megan led a white couple, no visible reservation, straight to one of the window tables. Daniel didn't protest, just pressed record on history. She wasn't seeking revenge, she was seeking truth. Because when exclusion repeats itself at every corner, it's not coincidence, it's culture, and that culture was about to be exposed to the world. If you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong, this is your video. Like, share, and stay tuned. What Daniel's about to do will transform everything. That night, while the Lancaster Grand's hallways empty and luxury slipped into silence, Daniel was drafting what would become one of the most devastating reports ever issued by Dominion Equity Partners. It contained no adjectives, no exaggerations, only facts, dates, tones of voice, exact phrases, attached recordings, photographs, everything, carefully documented. The file had a simple name: Lancaster Grand, Final Ethical Evaluation. It detailed not only the incidents Daniel had experienced firsthand, but also the internal testimonies her team had gathered across several cities: Cape Town, Dubai, London, receptionists ignoring black clients, employees with foreign accents being relegated to back-end roles, systematic denial of upgrades to solo female travelers, especially those who didn't look corporate. The pattern wasn't anecdotal, it was systemic, and now it was exposed. At 2:14, Daniel sent the report to 4 key departments: auditing, institutional relations, investment strategy, and communications. The subject line was brief: cancel negotiations with Lancaster, high reputational risk, full evaluation attached. As she clicked send, she didn't smile, she simply exhaled. She wasn't after vengeance, she had fulfilled her purpose, delivering justice without noise, because some battles are won not with noise but with precision and silence. The next morning at exactly 9, an internal email exploded, like a bomb inside the offices of Dominion Equity Partners. The subject: immediate cancellation of agreement with Lancaster Grand Hotels. Attached, an 87-page report with undeniable evidence of a systemic pattern of racial exclusion. By 9:47, the news began to leak, first to financial media, then to executive forums. By noon, the hashtags "Justice at the Grand" and "Cancel Lancaster" were trending worldwide. At 2, a leaked video began to circulate on social media. The front desk scene where Ethan made his comment about the card. The lobby's security camera had captured it all. The contempt, the tone, the humiliation, and at the center of the controversy, Daniel's unshakable presence. Calm, poised, devastating. The comments poured in. How dare they judge her by her skin? This hotel will never see a dime from me. Thank you, Daniel, for not staying silent. By 6 ever, Ethan Garrison had been suspended without pay. The Lancaster Grand issued a generic statement: "We regret any negative experience," but it was too late. Dominion Equity Partners released its own statement, confirming the cancellation of the $2.8 billion deal in detailing the reasons: severe ethical violations, covert discrimination, and lack of inclusive protocols. Within 24 hours, the parent company's market value dropped by, and not just that, other luxury hotel chains began internal audits, fearing they might be next. Daniel didn't appear in the media. She gave no interviews. Her silence became her loudest statement. In the days that followed, Daniel Weaker's case became a topic of analysis in universities, investment forums, and executive boardrooms across the globe. Not because of scandal, but because of structure. Not for virality but for evidence. In London, Forbes headlined, "The Woman Who Destroyed an Empire with a Glance." In Cape Town, Business Daily wrote, "The ethical revolution begins at the front desk." The message was clear. What began with a rejected card had become a global re-evaluation of business practices. Several luxury hotel chains announced renewed inclusion policies within days: mandatory training on diversity and equitable treatment, blind recruitment processes, virtual reality programs simulating discrimination experiences, anonymous reporting channels for guests and staff. But the most powerful change didn't come from corporate PR. It came from respect, from recognition. International firm Ernst & Young proposed a new ethical evaluation standard for the hospitality industry. They called it the W standard, in honor of her W for weaker, W for woman, W for worth. This standard wouldn't just evaluate profits or facilities, it would evaluate attitudes, because what happened at the Lancaster Grand proved that true luxury isn't in marble floors, it's in how someone is treated the moment they walk through the front door. Daniel meanwhile remained silent. She wasn't seeking fame, she simply did what was right. Ethan Garrison was summoned to a private meeting at the Lancaster Grand's corporate offices. No cameras, no witnesses, just 3 executives, and an envelope with his name on. Inside, a termination letter, citing inappropriate conduct, lack of cultural sensitivity, and severe reputational damage. The same man who once felt entitled to judge a woman by the color of her skin, now realized too late that he hadn't made a minor mistake. He had lit a fuse. He was left alone. No staff member defended him. No one said, "It wasn't that bad," because everyone knew, everyone had seen, and in the end, the cost of underestimating a woman who didn't fit his mold was his own career. Meanwhile in Washington, Daniel returned to her office without announcements or interviews. She continued with her work. New reports, new projects, but something had shifted. She was no longer just a CEO. On social media, thousands of Black women began sharing similar experiences, using the hashtag #IamDaniel. The stories varied, but the pattern was the same: stares, rejections, doubts, all because they dared to exist in places where power was still equated with a certain look. Daniel didn't respond to messages. She gave no speeches, because she had said everything, through her actions. And she understood something that few truly do. True power doesn't need to be seen. It only needs to be exercised with purpose. And that purpose resonated most of all. They weren't shaken by her voice. They were undone by her silence. The Lancaster case was studied, replicated and debated in business schools, ethics forums and corporate strategy meetings around the world. But the most astonishing part wasn't the hotel's collapse. It was what came next. Small business owners began re-evaluating how they treated their clients. Universities made Daniel Weaker a required case study in business ethics. Recruitment firms began developing automated filters to prevent bias during interviews. What had begun as a humiliation wrapped in marble had become the beginning of a new language, one where courtesy no longer concealed prejudice, where power was no longer synonymous with skin color, and where a CEO no longer needed to raise her voice to bring down entire walls. But Daniel never sought her name in lights. She never gave a lecture about what she'd lived through, because she understood something very few do. Real power doesn't need to be visible. It simply needs to be exercised with integrity, and that integrity was what shook the industry the most. It wasn't an outcry that toppled them. It was a look, a silence, a carefully crafted report, a signature, a decision, and that changed everything. The next time someone walks into a hotel, regardless of how they're dressed, what accent they have, or the color of their skin, someone will remember the name Daniel Weaker, even if no one says it aloud. Because some changes don't come with applause. They come with principle. There were no statues, no ceremonies, no medals, but every woman who saw her story understood something vital. They are not alone. The world may seem deaf, but there are eyes watching, minds recording and hands acting, without needing to Daniel Weaker wasn't made famous by her pain, but by her determination. She didn't kick down doors or demand justice with banners. She did it from a laptop, from an Excel sheet, from a gaze that never sought revenge, but precision, and that is the legacy that matters. Because in the end, true change isn't always sparked by the loudest voices or the biggest stages. Sometimes it's ignited by the ones who walk alone, who are underestimated, ignored, and still don't bend. Daniel wasn't trying to punish anyone. She simply wanted to know if that place was worth, and the answer was clear. It wasn't. That's why the fall of the Lancaster Grand wasn't an act of destruction. It was an act of cleansing, a purification, a reminder that if luxury isn't human, it isn't luxury. If exclusivity isn't inclusive, it's arrogant. Weeks later, Daniel walked into another lobby. This time, no one stared.
not because they recognized her, but because something had changed, and that was enough. Sometimes you don't need a voice to be heard. Sometimes you just need to refuse to step, because when you walk with truth, even empires must bow.